Hi there, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, an almanac of garden history, literature, and small botanical joys. I'm Jennifer Eatling, and today is February 6th. There are gardeners who love what grows on its own, and there are gardeners who can't help themselves. They lean in, they intervene, they carry pollen on their fingertips, they stop canopies from creeping, they burn up the land, they dig rivers. They make a future where there wasn't one yet. Today's stories are for the people who didn't just admire the natural world. They entered it and left it changed. Here's today's garden history. It was on this day in 1617 that Prospero Alpini died. Prospero was an Italian physician and botanist, and one of those rare figures who made Europe feel larger simply by describing what he'd seen. In the 1580s, Prospero traveled to Egypt and lived in Cairo for years. And he didn't travel like a tourist. He traveled like a person with a notebook in one hand and curiosity in the other. He studied what grew there: palms, spices, unfamiliar fruits, plants Europeans had heard rumors about but didn't yet understand. And then there was the date palm. Prospero noticed something that seemed obvious to gardeners now, but in Europe at the time, it wasn't common knowledge. Date palms have male and female flowers on separate plants. The trees, in other words, don't do everything alone. And Prospero realized if the pollen doesn't reach the female flowers, you don't get fruit. So he did what gardeners do. He stepped in. He became one of the first people in Europe to write down the idea that plant reproduction could be observed, understood, and helped along. That pollination wasn't magic. It was a process. And there's something quietly modern about that. A scientist, yes, but also a gardener in the most practical sense. Someone willing to use his hands. Prospero's writings also brought Europeans some of their earliest descriptions of coffee and bananas, not as fantasies, but as real plants, grown and used in daily life. And later, Carl Linnaeus honored him by naming a whole genus after him, Alpinia, in the ginger family. And if you've ever grown a ginger lily, you've met Prospero's name without realizing it. A tall, tender perennial, a plant that feels like warmth. And when it blooms, it carries that rich perfume people often compare to gardenias, one of those fragrances that stops you mid-step. Prospero died in 1617, but his legacy is the kind that keeps traveling through books, through plant names, through every gardener who's ever helped a fruit set. And it was on this day in 1778 that Ugo Foscolo was born, an Italian poet who lived much of his life in exile and who in England found a kind of solace that wasn't literary at all. It was a garden. Not a grand estate, not a formal paradise. A small, lived-in garden, the kind you plant when you're trying to survive your own thoughts, the kind you tend when home has become complicated and the future feels uncertain. In a letter written from London, Ugo describes growing plants for someone he cared about, invoking the sun and the rain and the spring, trying to coax flowers from stubborn things. And then he writes a line that gardeners understand immediately, that if he had to choose between writing a beautiful poem and growing a beautiful jasmine, he would rather be a gardener. Not because poetry failed him, but because gardening is a form of hope you can touch. Because when you grow something, you are anchored in the present with an eye toward the future. And you are cultivating hope. And maybe that's what exile does to a person. It makes the smallest rooted thing feel like a promise, like freedom, like a tether when you are far from home. In today's Unearthed Words, we hear an excerpt from An Extraordinary Year of Ordinary Days by Susan Wittig Albert, one of my favorite authors. This book was published in 2010, and this was her entry for this day, February 5th. Susan writes, "A windstorm, no rain sadly, blasted through the hill country this morning, dropping the temperature 40 degrees in 3 hours. The first brave daffodil, unruffled, survived the wind. I won't have many garden flowers this year because of the flood damage last July, when it rained for nearly the full month without let-up. Not many wildflowers either. Too much rain last summer, none at all since September. Nothing measurable, anyway. 5 months, dry as old bones. The April bluebonnets will be sparse. But there's a blessing in inhabiting a place for a long time. I'm consoled with the knowledge that although there may be only a few flowers this spring, those few will be beautiful, and that when the rains come next autumn or the autumn after, we will have bluebonnets again. I know that the hummingbirds will arrive around the 15th of March, give or take a week, and that the monarchs will be sailing through our woods not long after that on their way north from Mexico. Scarlet paintbrush and Blackfoot daisy and purple monarda, all in their time. And eventually, it will rain again. Someday." That last word, someday, is gardening in one breath. Not denial, not certainty, just lived. A gardener's faith in the cyclical nature of things. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, The Lost Gardens by Anthony Eglin. This week has been Novels Week here at the Daily Gardener, a week-long celebration of fiction books so that you can enjoy cozy garden stories by the fire. And today's book is just that. It's a cozy mystery with real horticultural bones in it, the kind that make you want to pour a cup of tea and look up old garden plans afterward. In The Lost Gardens, we meet Lawrence Kingston, a retired botany professor who knows plants the way some people know faces, by instinct, by detail, by memory. When a California woman named Jamie Gibson inherits an old estate in the Cotswolds, she doesn't just inherit a crumbling house. She inherits a garden that has slipped out of time. Paths lost underfoot, borders gone feral, structures erased by neglect. Jamie hires Lawrence to help restore it, and restoration, as gardeners know, is never just weeding, it's excavation. And as they begin pulling back layers of the garden, they uncover old secrets, a hidden chapel, a well, and evidence that the past on this estate is not finished speaking. Sounds delightful, doesn't it? This is the kind of book that understands how gardens keep records, not in ink, in hedges, in walls, in what persists, in what disappears. And if you like your mysteries gentle but intelligent, with plant knowledge woven into the plot like twine, The Lost Gardens is a very satisfying read. And finally, here's something sweet to ignite the little botanic spark in your heart. It was on this day in 1783 that Lancelot Brown died, but his nickname, the name he was known by, was Capability, as in, this place has capability. Capability had a gift for walking in the state and seeing what it could become, not in clipped hedges and rigid geometry, but in rolling lawns, curving water, tree clumps placed like brushstrokes, and long views that looked effortless even when they required immense labor. But here's the small, tender thing to think about today. At Hampton Court Palace, while Brown was in charge of the gardens, a little vine was planted. The year was 1778. He was really just a cutting at first, a gardener's gamble, a living investment. And today, that vine is still there. Now known as the grapevine, it still produces grapes. It's still doing what it was asked to do 2.5 centuries ago: grow, climb, bear sweetness. When we talk about legacy in gardening, it doesn't always have to be dramatic. Sometimes it's a plant that outlives you, a vine that keeps showing up every year with its stubborn green answer. And that's the part that delights us, because even the biggest names in garden history, even the ones like Capability Brown, who moved lakes and hillsides, believed in the simple power of planting something and trusting time to finish the work. Today we heard from people who leaned in: a botanist carrying pollen by hand, a poet choosing jasmine over fame, a writer who knows the comfort of seasons returning, and a landscape maker whose work still ripples through living plants. Gardening is attention made visible, and sometimes it's an actual intervention, not to control the world, but to make its capabilities real. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day.